Maude, my Maude Mk2 Escort. I've already got the fuel pumps out the way. No, is that cross-threaded? Happy days. Hello into a new day, and it's one of those days, you know. And I took this diff out of the freezer and it's just too small for the diff. Like, put another spanner in the works of getting Maude back on the road. It's only coming out of one speaker. Yeah, this stuff is like, you know, for my small brain. Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes, and if you watched the last video on this channel, you would have seen how I utterly failed to complete the job of replacing all the poly bushes on the leaf springs of Maude, my Maude Mk2 Escort. As you can see, I've already got her jacked up, and yes, she is sitting on axle stands. So it's time for me to dive into replacing her leaf spring shackles, which means I can then complete the job that I failed to complete in the last video. So over here I've got some brand new leaf spring shackles from eBay, but they actually came from Motorsport Tools, and I'm still waiting for them to email me about letting me come to have a joyride in one of their brand new Mk1 or Mk2 Escorts. Now these spring shackles shouldn't be much bother to fit at all, especially seeing as everything's still loose on the car. I've already got the fuel pumps out the way and the tank is still loose, so that I'll be able to do the driver's side one easy. The weather isn't great, but let's face it, it's going to get a whole lot worse over the next few months, so I might as well get used to being out in the rain working on my cars. So I'm going to get this done as quick as I can, so let's cue some music. Starting with the driver's side, I used the jack to support the leaf spring whilst I removed the old spring shackle, which was really easy because it didn't have any nuts on it. With the poly bush transferred over, I could then fit the first half of the shackle into the chassis, and then the second half of the shackle went into the leaf spring, and then I was able to connect it all together and fit the nuts loosely. I then repeated the process for the passenger side shackle, which was a lot easier because there's no fuel tank in the way. And then with the anti-tramp bar nuts and bolts and the leaf spring nuts refitted loosely, I could lower Maude down and then go round and tighten everything up. The anti-tramp bar nuts and bolts were quite hard to get to with the car on the ground. Next I needed to bolt the fuel tank back in, not forgetting to fit the nylon spacers. And once those bolts were done up, I set about refitting the fuel pump bracket. I had to temporarily remove the fuel pressure regulator to get the last two rivets in, and then I just refitted the regulator and the fuel pump, and that was the job complete. Alright, so now that's done, I do want to have a look at getting Maude's diff ready to refit, but first I want to have a look at her steering rack. I mentioned in the last video that the passenger side steering rack clamp doesn't seem to be clamping the steering rack tight enough to the crossmember, and it's actually, you know, allowing the steering rack to move when you turn the steering wheel. So yeah, let's jack Maude's front end up and see if we can solve that issue. Alright, so essentially this clamp isn't clamping the steering rack tight enough to the crossmember. Now, I've showed you before that underneath there, sort of in the middle of the clamp but underneath the rack, is a bit of plastic which acts as a spacer. Now, loads of you have been in touch to give me advice about this, which is very much appreciated, and a lot of you are saying that I should add some sort of rubber to the clamps, but one thing I do want to try is essentially making the spacer in there thicker, and I don't have any sort of thin strips of metal here, but I thought maybe I could like jam a washer in between the spacer and this bit here of the crossmember that the clamp sits on, which is essentially going to make everything a tighter fit in there and might mean that the steering rack is clamped tight enough to not move. So I'm going to undo these bolts, which are annoying on this side because the captive nuts are cross-threaded, so I've actually got nuts screwed on to the back of the bolts. So yeah, I'll just undo these bolts and then see if I can, you know, trap one of these washers underneath the bit of plastic in there, do it all back up and then we'll test it and see if it's any better. Should be able to get to the upper nut through here. Yeah, now I need to slide them both in. So yeah, you can just see the bit of plastic and then the washer underneath it. So now it's just a case of bolting it back up, getting the car on the ground, and then I'll call my beautiful girlfriend Kat to come around and wiggle the steering whilst I have a look to see if the rack is still slipping. Oh no, is that cross-threaded? Alright, so I actually ended up cross-threading another one of those steering rack bolts, and the fourth one felt like it was almost cross-threading as well. And unlike at my other garage, I don't have an endless supply of new nuts here. And yeah, I managed to find a nylock, but with something so awkward to get to, I'd rather not use a nylock. But yeah, managed to get the steering rack bolted back on. And now that my beautiful girlfriend has come round to give me a hand, let's have a look to see if that steering rack is still moving like it was before. And as I hope you can see there, the rack is now not slipping in between that bracket. Happy days. You can definitely see the sort of bit of the cross member that the rack is attached to, you know, flexing a little bit under the strain, even though this cross member has been modified to sort of RS spec with the strengthening bits. I know that some people actually put a bar between the two steering rack bracket bits on the cross member, which I haven't done, but yeah, I'm happy that the rack now isn't moving, you know, slipping in those clamps. Hello, into a new day, and it's one of those days. Those of you that have been watching my on-track videos will know that I recently had some issues with my MacBook Pro, and then I bought another MacBook Pro, and I've been having some issues with that as well. I'm not that great when it comes to computers, but I do need a working computer every day. Anyway, because of all that, I've ended up getting out way later than planned, and the plan was today to go round to Maude's garage and basically get her diff ready to go back in and yeah, get her back on the road basically. But what I realise is her new welded diff doesn't have the side bearings on it. And I thought, well, I don't have a press and I don't have like a bearing puller, but I'll have a go at whacking the old bearings off of the old diff just with a hammer and chisel. And just as I started to do that, I realised that one of them, on the side where the half shaft snapped, is actually cracked. On the inner race of the bearing, it's actually cracked. So I thought, well, I need one bearing, so I may as well just buy a pair, right? So today, I'm going to go and see my friends at BURTON Power to pick up a couple of those bearings. Now, the thing is, I was planning to go and see BURTON Power tomorrow for something for Esther, my ST170 powered Mk1 Escort. But before I go and get those parts, I need to head over to Esther's garage and do some measuring. So now at 10 to 2 in the afternoon, I'm heading over to Esther's garage to do the measuring that I need to collect the data that I need to. I need to do some maths as well. And then I'm going to rush over to BURTON Power to pick up those parts and some bearings for Maude's diff, hopefully before they close. Alright, so if you've been watching my videos, you'll know that I recently discovered that the valve clearances on this thing were too wide, which is potentially going to mean that the valves aren't opening as much as would be ideal and could actually be costing me a couple of horsepower. Now, if you didn't watch this video, definitely go back and watch that and you'll see what I've done so far. But essentially, where I'm at now is I need to decide what sized buckets, I think they're called followers, and that is these things. So I need to decide what sized ones of these I need to fit to get the clearances correct. Some engines you can fit shims, but these ones you actually have to change the bucket. So I need thicker buckets basically to close the gaps up. Now some of these buckets and some of the buckets that are in my spare ST170 head, I might be able to shuffle around so I don't need to buy all 16, right? But when I was doing the calculations in the last video, there was a few of these that didn't have the number written on the underside of them, and I just measured them with my measuring calipers, which only gives me, you know, 1 decimal place. So this front one, and then this one and this one. But, you know, all the others, the numbers on the bottom of them are 3 decimal places. So, you know, it wasn't accurate enough. So I was at home trying to figure out what buckets will suit, you know, what cylinders. And essentially, I can't really work out what those 3 cylinders are going to be because I haven't got an accurate enough measurement for those buckets. You know, we're talking about fractions of a millimetre here. So, you know, you really do need to get it right. Now, another thing that I was wrong about before is how expensive these buckets are. They're not actually that expensive to buy. Burton Power sell them for £7 something each. I think it is £7 or £8 each. For some reason, I thought they were £16 each. So because the buckets are cheaper than I was expecting, I may as well try and get this bang on, you know, rather than sort of trying to close the gaps up a bit. I may as well get it so they're perfect, right? So I need to measure those 3 that I couldn't measure properly last time, but while I'm at it, I may as well just measure them all just to check that the numbers that were read on the underside of them is correct, because some of the numbers are really hard to read, and also these might have worn out a bit from use. So following advice from you guys, I've gone and got myself a micrometer, and this basically, you know, is going to be able to measure down to 1/1000th of a millimetre. Got this from Amazon. It wasn't expensive, so yeah, going to give this a go. So yeah, basically you twist this knob, that closes these jaws up, and as you can see, you know, we're talking like 10.312 millimetres, you know. So as you turn that, you know, it is really, really accurate. So I'm basically going to measure all these buckets again and the ones in my spare ST170 head. And then I should be able to do the calculation that I did in the other video again to work out exactly what size buckets I need to fit. And yeah, then I can work out what buckets can be shuffled around elsewhere and which buckets I need to just buy new from Burton's today. So for instance, this front one that I wasn't able to measure properly last time, I'll just give it a clean. And I'm guessing we should close this up, just make sure that it's dead on 0 at the bottom, which it is. And we are of course measuring from that little nipple in there to this flat. And what's really cool about this is it clicks, so you're not doing it sort of unnecessarily tight. So it's clicking now, so it's not going in any further. And yeah, the number I've got on there is 11.586 millimetres. So I'm going to write that data down. I'm going to check all the others and check the ones in my spare cylinder head. And then I'll see you in Roger the Plastic Fiesta's cockpit. All right, so I think I've got all the data that I need. I found that when I was doing the calculation, there was a couple that I had measured were thicker than what's written on the underneath of them, which can't be right. You know, they'll get thinner through wear, not thicker, right? So I went and rechecked the measurement on them. I basically ended up rechecking the measurement on all the ones that are on Esther's head that's fitted to her engine now. And I think what happened was the ones that I'd done first were accurate and the ones that I'd done last were not accurate. And I think it's probably good practice to like re-zero the tool after every few that you do. And I did re-zero it before I did the ones in the spare cylinder head, so hopefully they're all right. I didn't have time to recheck everything. At this point I'd already worked out what buckets I think I need for like the first half of Esther's head that I'd already measured, which, you know, when I rechecked, luckily they were okay. It was just when I started doing, you know, the exhaust side. So yeah, I think I've got all the data I need. I'm trying to get Esther back together for this weekend because Oscar, the winner of my recent raffle, has asked if I can drop his prizes off with Esther and then take him for a spin in her. So that's the plan. But now, you know, because I was at the garage a bit longer than planned, I've now got to get through the traffic and hopefully get to Burton Power before they shut. Because if I don't, then I won't even have the parts to get Maude back together, which was the main plan of today. Hello, into another new day, and unfortunately yesterday when I went to see the guys at Burton Power, they didn't have enough of each of the sizes of buckets that I was looking for. Right, so I worked out yesterday that there was basically 7 of the buckets that I wasn't able to, you know, make right by shuffling around all the ones that I had. So we've got 4 down here and 3 up here. And then I worked out that basically I was going to need 4 6.85s, 3 11.745s, and then I was going to get 3 11.805s that, you know, I could machine down to work. Unfortunately, they only had 2 of them, 2 of them, and 2 of them in stock. So I've been scratching my head a bit more, and this is the best I can come up with. So this one, 11.687, I have an 11.685, so that's close enough for that. And I have another 11.685, which I've decided I'm going to put over here. So that will be like 5 thousandths of a millimetre too thick, so that should be fine. But there is also 2 others that I need an 11.678, and there's the other 3 over here that need 11.6 or 768, 772 and 787, so 11.77 roughly. So the only thing I can do really is use the 2 11.805s that I managed to get and have them machined down to 11.77 mil. The other one of the 3, I'm just going to have to put an 11.745 in there, so that will be not thick enough, but that's the closest I can get. And yeah, these other 2 over here, I'll just have to get the other 11.745 one machined down. But by accident, I actually ended up bringing home one of the buckets out of the spare cylinder heads, basically the last one that I measured, and that is a 715, so 11.715. So I can get that machined down to 11.678 as well. So basically it means that if my calculations are right, everything's going to be pretty much perfect except for this one here, where the bucket will be about 20 thousandths of a millimetre too thin. So it won't turn out too bad if I've done my measurements right and my maths right, and if I'm actually able to get these buckets machined down. I'm actually going to go and see the machine shop that's quite local to where I live that skimmed the exhaust manifold flange for Esther a while ago. Now I'm planning to get this video out today, so I do want to go and see that machine shop in a minute. But before I go, I've got some more bad news about Maude. Now last night I had this welded diff in the freezer, and the plan was today to fit the new side bearings to it. With the diff in the freezer, I was hoping that I could probably heat up the bearings slightly, and then, yeah, hopefully then they would just literally slip on, and then you let everything, you know, get back to the right temperature again, and then there'll be a tight fit. Or it would have certainly made things easier with me, you know, whacking the bearings on with a hammer and socket, because I don't have a press here. But when I took this diff out the freezer and just, you know, I wanted to see if the bearing would slip on without me heating it up, right? And I could clearly see that this bearing is just too small for the diff. Like, no matter what you do, like, even if you had a press, like, that's not going to go on there. And if we look at this welded diff up against Maude's old one, it's probably not showing very well on the camera, but this is clearly taller. So this is wider and the diff is taller. So I can only assume that this is actually an Atlas diff and not an English one, which is going to put another spanner in the works of getting Maude back on the road. You know, I was hoping to get her on the road today or tomorrow. But yeah, gonna have to get another diff and get that welded up, and then, you know, get it put into the diff casing and set it up right, and then I can think about getting Maude on the road. So yeah, absolute nightmare. David Coogan, who you've seen on the channel before, has said that he's got an English diff that he's going to donate to me. Massive thanks to you if you're watching. So yeah, I'm going to go and see him later, and then hopefully I'll be able to go and see the guys at Inky's Autos tomorrow and ask them very nicely if they wouldn't mind waving their MIG welder another diff for me. But yeah, absolute nightmare. Anyway, let's go and see if I can actually get these buckets machined today. Alright, so I went to see my local machine shop, and they informed me that the cam followers are hardened, which means they're not able to machine them down, but they did send me to somewhere local that does grinding. They even send stuff to them to get ground. And they've basically said that they're not going to be able to tackle those until the beginning of next week. So, you know, I'm not able to get them done today, which, you you know, I wasn't really expecting to, but, you know, it was worth a try. But with me not being able to get them done today, then there's definitely no way I'm going to be able to get Esther back together this weekend to go and see Oscar. So apologies to you if you're watching, mate. But yeah, this whole video has been an absolute nightmare, but, you know, it's all good. It's all part of the fun. But yeah, you know, I was hoping to get Maude back on the road in this video, and that hasn't happened. And I was hoping to get Esther back on the road, you know, this weekend, and that's not going to happen. Now, the saga actually continues with me trying to edit this video. Today is Friday, so if you're watching this on Friday, that means I succeeded on getting out today. If you're not, then sorry for the delay. But yeah, basically all the audio on this video is only coming out of one speaker, so it means either the media mod on my GoPro or the wire is faulty. Now, I do have a trick that I used to use on my old MacBook to solve issues like that. On the old MacBook, it had a microphone input and a headphone input or output. So you could put a wire going between each of those and basically play the video and record the audio from the video at the same time. So then it would, you know, that would end up basically recording it in both speakers. But my new MacBook only has a headphone socket. And I think you can get like an adapter or whatever to run it through the USB or one of the other sockets, but I don't have that here. So yeah, if I did get this video out on Friday and you can only hear it in one ear, then apologies for that. But yeah, I'm running out of time to get this edited in time. I was actually planning to go round to Maude's garage and just tackle a really small job that I'm now able to do, just because, you know, I haven't done nearly as much as I wanted to in this video up to now. But yeah, definitely haven't got time for that. So yeah, this video has been an absolute nightmare. On a more positive note, as I've already mentioned, I will be going to see David Coogan today to pick up another diff. And I've already spoke to Inky and he said I can bring it down to get welded tomorrow. So yeah, there's some positivity. But yeah, there is actually one more bit of negativity that I've just realised, because one of the buckets that I've taken to get machined down was this 715 that I accidentally brought home with me, which was fitted to the spare cylinder head. And I was actually banking on using this in one of these three here. You know, these need like an 11.70, and I've got three that are 11.71, so they're there and there. I mean, technically they are too thick, but they're as close as I've got. Now, the company are going to ring me on Monday before they actually do the job and just give me like a price, because, you know, the buckets are cheap, so I don't want to have to pay like, you know, loads and loads and loads of money for them to machine them down when, you know, I could just be patient and get the right size buckets. So when they ring me, if the price is okay, I'm actually gonna say to them, right, don't machine down that 715 because I can take them down. The 11.745 one that I was gonna put in here, which would have been, you know, too thin for it anyway. Yeah, so they can machine this one down to be 11.67 to go in one of these, and then I can use this 11.749 to go over here, and you know, that's in my spare cylinder head and I haven't crossed it off, so that hasn't been claimed for any of the other positions. So yeah, it's all very confusing stuff. I think realistically I'm just gonna do what I can, you know, hopefully I've got it semi right, put it back together and then remeasure and then, you know, see where I'm at again. But yeah, this stuff, it's like, you know, for my small brain. But yeah, this video has been an absolute mess, but hoping for some more positive news in the next video. If you did think this video was any good, please do give it a thumbs up and a share. If you didn't, give it a thumbs up anyway, because I've had so much bad luck. If you are new to the channel, do click subscribe to keep up to date with all future uploads. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, TikTok and Instagram. Check out my website for merchandise and parts. Massive, massive thanks as always to my patrons for your ongoing support. I'll leave all the links to everything in the description as usual, along with my email address for anyone who wants to contact me. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.